that small, ordinary moments could change a life forever. But now, when I look back at everything that has happened, I realize that love always begins quietly, like a soft breeze before a storm, a warm sunrise before the day becomes bright. And my story with Liam began exactly like that. Quietly, unexpectedly, and so gently that I almost didn't notice how deeply he became a part of my world. I first saw him on a Tuesday morning in early September, when the air was still warm but already smelled of autumn. I was sitting in the campus café, pretending to read while secretly observing people and trying to guess their stories. Liam walked in with his usual lazy sort of confidence, a tired hoodie hanging from his shoulders, headphones around his neck, and his hair still wet from the rain. He looked like someone who wasn't trying to impress anyone, but somehow still did. He ordered coffee, then looked around for an empty seat. The cafe was crowded, and before I realized what was happening, his eyes met mine. There was something disarming about the way he smiled. Small, apologetic, yet bright enough to warm the room. He took a step toward me and asked if he could sit down. I nodded, pretending to be indifferent, though my heart had already betrayed me. We didn't talk much that day. A few polite sentences, a couple of shy glances, but there was this strange, soft electricity between us, as if our souls had already agreed on something our minds didn't yet understand. The next morning, he was there again, and the morning after that. He said he liked the coffee. I suspected he liked something else too, though neither of us admitted it for weeks.
It wasn't until the first truly cold day of autumn that we had our first real conversation. I remember how he walked in, rubbing his hands together, complaining that he had forgotten his gloves again. I had been knitting a scarf the night before, and, without thinking too much, I asked him about his favorite color. He blinked in confusion, then laughed, and for the first time I heard his unguarded voice, warm, low, and a little shy. "Green," he said. "Why?" "No reason," I lied. We talked for hours that day. We discovered that we both loved thunderstorms, old bookstores, and long walks with no destination. He told me about his dreams. Not the big ones that people announce proudly to the world, but the quiet ones he kept protected, like becoming a writer someday or living in a house by the sea. I told him about my fears, the ones I had always kept hidden because I thought no one would understand. But he did. He listened the way people rarely do, fully, deeply, without judgment. As autumn turned into winter, our meetings became the best part of my days. It was never planned. We simply kept showing up, as if drawn to each other by gravity. We walked through the city wrapped in scarves and shared stories in the warm glow of streetlights. He would brush snowflakes from my hair, and I would pretend not to notice how my heart fluttered each time. I didn't realize I was falling in love with him until the night we got caught in a snowstorm. The streets were empty, the wind loud, and everything was covered in white. We ran, laughing, our breath turning into clouds. When we reached the park, the world was so silent that it felt almost sacred. Liam suddenly stopped, breathless and glowing in the cold light.
"You look happy," he said softly. "I am," I whispered. And then he took my hand. It was such a simple gesture, yet it felt like the universe shifted beneath my feet. His fingers were cold, but his touch was warm, grounding, steady. I looked up at him, and he smiled the way he used to when he first saw me, small, gentle, but full of meaning. That was the moment I finally understood. I loved him. The months that followed were the brightest ones I can remember. We weren't a perfect couple, not at all. We argued sometimes about silly things. He hated waking up early, and I hated being late. He was impulsive. I was cautious.
but somehow our imperfections fit together like puzzle pieces, forming a picture that made sense only when we were side by side. He read me the beginnings of the stories he wrote late at night. I knitted him gloves because he kept losing them. We tried new cafes, wandered through bookstores, cooked disastrous dinners, and talked about everything, from fears we didn't admit to anyone else to the mundane details of our day. We learned each other's rhythms, secrets, and dreams. Spring arrived slowly that year, but when it did, I felt something changing. Not in a bad way. No, it felt like life shifting, opening new doors we hadn't expected. Liam received an offer for a writing internship abroad. It was his dream, something he had talked about with sparkling eyes, something he deserved more than anyone I knew. But when he told me, his voice trembled slightly. "It's for 6 months. I don't want to leave you." The words struck me harder than I expected, not because I feared the distance, but because I saw the fear in his eyes, the fear of losing us. I took his hands in mine and told him that love is not something fragile, not something that breaks just because miles stretch between two hearts. I told him I believed in him, in us, and that dreams should never be sacrificed for fear. He kissed me then, slow, deep, grateful, and I knew I had made the right choice. The 6 months were difficult. The distance was heavy, the longing sharp. Some nights we talked for hours, other nights one of us fell asleep mid-call. He sent me pictures of the sea, of his writing desk, of sunsets he wished I could see with him. I sent him voice messages full of mundane details of my day because he said they made him feel like he was home again. But even though the distance hurt, our love never weakened. If anything, it grew roots, deep, stubborn, unbreakable. When he finally returned, I almost didn't recognize him from afar. He looked older somehow, more confident, like someone who had walked through storms and grown because of them. But when he smiled, it was the same smile that had melted my heart that very first morning in the café. I ran to him before I could think. He dropped his suitcase and wrapped me in his arms so tightly that the world disappeared. I felt his heartbeat against mine, fast and trembling, and I knew, without doubt, without fear, that this was where I belonged. He kissed me then, slow, deep, grateful, and I knew I had made the right choice. The 6 months were difficult. The distance was heavy, the longing sharp. Some nights we talked for hours. Other nights one of us fell asleep mid-call. He sent me pictures of the sea, of his writing desk, of sunsets he wished I could see with him. I sent him voice messages full of mundane details of my day because he said they made him feel like he was home again. But even though the distance hurt, our love never weakened. If anything, it grew roots, deep, stubborn, unbreakable. When he finally returned, I almost didn't recognize him from afar. He looked older somehow, more confident, like someone who had walked through storms and grown because of them. But when he smiled, it was the same smile that had melted my heart that very first morning in the cafe. I ran to him before I could think. He dropped his suitcase and wrapped me in his arms so tightly that the world disappeared. I felt his heartbeat against mine, fast and trembling, and I knew, without doubt, without fear, that this was where I belonged. He kissed me then, slow, deep, grateful, and I knew I had made the right choice. He kissed me then, slow, deep, grateful, and I knew I had made the right choice. Ours is one of them. And this, I think, is the real magic of love. Not that it begins spectacularly, but that it grows quietly, patiently, into something stronger than time or distance. something that finds you when you least expect it and stays with you even when the world changes. This is my story, our story. A quiet beginning, a strong middle, and a future still unfolding. One heartbeat, one smile, one shared dream at a time.